When I visited the biggest theme park in Europe, I had certain expectations for many of the different rides there. Some were as expected, some were better than expected, and some were worse than expected. Matterhorn Blitz was the most disappointing ride for me at Europa-Park in Rust, Germany. Not that it's bad, but I really just wanted it to be better than it was. Europa-Park is owned by German manufacturer MACK Rides, and of course, you can't have a MACK Park without a MACK Rides Wilde Maus, which is what Matterhorn Blitz is, a MACK Wild Mouse coaster that opened in 1999 and of course features the traditional small four-rider cars. In my review today, I will go over 7 categories to cover just about how good Matterhorn really is. I will use a scoring system with points up to 10, and the scores will then be used for a final average score. But first, let's take a quick look at the stats. Matterhorn Blitz is like the usual large park Wild Mouse clone from MACK Rides, except for one detail which I will get into later, but this almost clone has a height of 52.5 feet as well as a length of 1,256.6 feet, as well as a top speed of 35 miles an hour, making this another moderate family coaster. Appearance is the first category, and it is all about the look of the ride. Matterhorn unfortunately doesn't have the prettiest of tracks. In fact, it's a very dull look the coaster itself has to it. However, the ride is surrounded by a bunch of theming, and it is located in the Switzerland area of Europa-Park, which means it has Swiss theming, which includes a Swiss castle tower and some buildings, as well as beautiful scenery. However, it isn't enough for me to give it a super high score. I personally think it deserves a 5. It's average looking, I feel. Another thing to note is that a lot of the ride is actually kind of hidden behind all the trees and buildings around it, which gives it a secret feel. When people, including me, go to ride a Wild Mouse coaster, we often expect that it does have some thrills to offer. This includes lateral-filled switchbacks and fun drops. However, this is where Matterhorn Blitz disappointed me. Before getting to that though, I want to talk about the lift, which is what makes Matterhorn so special compared to other coasters of the same model. Inside the castle tower, you will find an elevator lift which takes 2 cars up at a time. This elevator lift is weird. You see, as you go up, it also tilts you, which gives some weak but fun sideways hang time. Then you go into the big main drop after a slow turn. And this is fun, sure, but it doesn't really do much. It definitely doesn't give any airtime whatsoever. Then you get into all the switchbacks, which is where you would expect the coaster to make it feel like you're about to fall out of the car. Unfortunately, Matterhorn was just too trimmed by the brakes, so it didn't really give a lot of force here. Sure, you do get some laterals, but they're weaker than I would have liked. I will quickly say that I did ride this coaster once, and when I did, my car actually stopped on the block brake right after the first drop, meaning that it was still picking up speed through the first switchbacks, but by the last few I could feel that the trims have started to kick in, meaning that it had reached the correct speed, so I still got to experience what it was supposed to do. That's actually something that I saw quite a lot in Europa-Park. In fact, almost every time I passed this coaster, a car was parked on the block brake, so I really think this coaster might have an operation problem, with them simply being too fast, which is something I never thought I would experience. But anyway, after the switchbacks, you'll be going down some more drops and turns, and you don't really get any airtime anywhere. You also don't really experience any hard laterals either, so it really does feel like a forceless and kind of boring ride really. I think the most exciting moment with the laterals was probably the curved drop that you experience halfway through, but that's not too special either. I experienced more G's on curved roads on my way home to Denmark. It really just is a kind of forceless ride. There are some forces, but they're just all weaker than you would have liked, so I'm going to award Matterhorn Blitz a score of 3. Nothing impressive, but it's okay, I suppose. Smoothness is something else that can really vary with these Wild Mouse coasters. Some, like Die Wilde Maus at Bakken, are nice and smooth, while others, like Crazy Mine at Hansa Park, are just flat out painful. Luckily, Matterhorn is one of the smoother ones. MACK Rides really do well with their switchbacks, so that the cars go gradually in and out of them, which makes them super smooth. And the rest of the ride also is just a smooth experience. It's not the smoothest coaster, of course, because of some of the movements that it does. I wouldn't say it's my smoothest Wild Mouse either. It is mostly just the transitions and the track shaping that is very smooth, but I will actually say that Matterhorn does have a little bit of a rattle, which is okay and quite normal for these kind of coasters, but I do have to take that into consideration, and it does indeed pull it down a little. I would say that in general, Matterhorn Blitz is smooth enough for a score of 7 out of 10. It's definitely not rough at all, but it does have those shakes and vibrations here and there, but again, it's really nothing at all. Ride time is next, and it is all about how long Matterhorn's ride feels, and I can say now that it has a pretty moderate ride length. The entire experience starts with that elevator lift, and it ends obviously at the final brake run. There's really not much to say about it. I'm going to give it a 5. It really just doesn't feel long, doesn't feel short, and it's just average really. Because some parts like the switchbacks feel long, while other parts like, well, everything after it feels a little short. One of Matterhorn Blitz's strong sides, however, is theming, and that is actually the case for many of Europa-Park's rides. Matterhorn is one of 2 Europa-Park coasters with great Swiss theming, and it all starts with the queue line, which really just makes you feel at home, safe and secure. You see all these great animatronics, and there's a fella sleeping, some guys having a get-together, which also includes a cute little doggo. There are chickens and freaking horses, which again are really well done, and the rooms themselves are also just flawless. And then there are the buildings themselves, like the castle and the station, that are very realistic and Swiss-like. At least as far as I can tell from my own Switzerland experiences. Throughout the ride there is of course also theming, which is really what completes the theming for me. Just like in the queue line, there are barn animals. You also pass through an actual barn, and everything put together makes Matterhorn worthy of 10 out of 10. The theming is super complete on the ride, and it's in good quality, and covers pretty much all of the coaster. Matterhorn also has some originality. Not a whole lot, cause it's far from the first Wild Maus coaster or even the first MACK Rides Wilde Maus, but it does hold its ground with being the first of MACK's large versions, and it obviously has its elevator lift, which is very unique, and that's really all that needs to be said when I give Matterhorn a score of 3 out of 10. Those 3 points being given for the lift and the fact that it had a very different layout from the traditional Wild Maus when it was built. Of course, that layout is cloned at several places today, but it wasn't back in 1999 as it was the first one with that type of layout. As you might have figured out by now, Matterhorn Blitz was not as much fun as I was hoping, which we will talk about in the overall fun category. So as I said, I was very disappointed, and I actually didn't find my ride very entertaining at all. Also because I did stop on a brake run, which did smash up my stomach, but I'm not going to count that as part of my score, since I do want this to be fair. The layout itself is just kind of dull and slow. The real issue is that it's really too trimmed, and that is unfortunate, because I really did see potential. The best part of the ride is honestly the theming, which is great, and that does make it a little more fun, but still only up to a score of 2. I'm sure some will have more fun on it than me, but I was just not impressed. I was honestly just glad to get the credit out of my way and say, alright, now I know how that is. And yes, I know I said I loved the theming, but it just didn't make up for much of my disappointment at all. All the scores bring us a final average of 5, right in the middle, pulled up by things like the theming and the lift, and pulled down by slow and uninteresting elements. Now I've gotta say, don't get me wrong, it's not that I simply don't like Wild Maus coasters. I for example love Die Wilde Maus at Bakken, however this one just didn't do it for me. I would still recommend it for the sake of the elevator lift, the theming, and so you can get your own opinion. But if you only have one day at Europa-Park, you might wanna skip waiting in a 30-minute line for this. Well, that's been my review of Matterhorn Blitz, the unique MACK Rides Wilde Maus at Europa-Park, the first of the large park models. I'm sorry if you found this review a little disappointing or depressing. That was just my experience. I'm sure you could have a much more positive opinion on this coaster than me. In fact, if you have written it, I would be more than glad to hear what you think of it in the comments below. Also, if you did enjoy the video, I would very much appreciate if you hit the like button to show me that you did. And the same goes for a subscription if you want to see more in the future, including more reviews from Europa-Park. Otherwise, it has been Northern Rides, and I hope you all keep on riding.